In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to make a great crumbling set of fortifications and ruins with a slightly evil, spooky vibe. Welcome to Wargaming. My name's Lachlan Linton Keane, and today we're going to be creating a crumbling necropolis of ruined fortifications using the new terrain kit range from zorbazorb.com, the Dark Fortress Ruin series. Now this series is a collection of different resin kits and components that you can use to make a whole range of different ruined and crumbling fortified buildings that are perfect for all that evil, spooky terrain, anywhere from Mordor and Angmar and Dol Guldur and Gundabad in the worlds of Lord of the Rings to lots of other really nice generic dark spooky ruins in all of the fantasy wargaming settings that we know and love. Even perfect for some really excellent D&D settings as well. It's a really versatile kit. There's a bunch of different pre-made buildings that come, which you can see here on the battlefield before you. We've got the big central crumbling citadel, which is the major flagship centerpiece of the range, as well as some other really nicely sized scatter terrain building options. But every single one of these buildings is made from core components that you can also purchase individually to design your own structures with different walls and archways and doors and joiners, so you can get as creative as you like. Now in this video we're going to be going through the big flagship piece, the central tower here, which is called the Crumbling Citadel. We're going to have a look at the big journey of building all of this, and then we'll also do a painting tutorial as well to get this really nice grimy dark fortress stonework that we've got going on. And then later down the track I'm also going to do some assembly guides on these particular pre-made kits that you can purchase already over at zorbazorb.com, and then we'll also get into having a look at designing our own fortifications, grabbing the components, and absolutely going crazy and building whatever the hell you want. So, without further ado, let's jump into assembling the Crumbling Citadel, the flagship of the Dark Fortress Ruin series. So it's always important to remember with a build of this magnitude to make sure that you're constructing things in an order so that you're always working from a solid base. So we're going to start from the base of the tower and work our way up to the top, nice and sensibly. Now the first thing to do before we dive into construction is just have a look and get a feel for some of the components. Obviously our main two constituents are our walls and our floor components, but then there's also a series of joiners and accessories that help the project come together. From the floor perspective, we've got our big central base which forms the basis and the bottom of the lower level. Then we've got two sort of triangular platforms which form the second level or the first floor, and then at the very top of the tower there's another couple of small triangular elements which round out those top sections. In terms of our walls, there's a couple of different types that we're working with. We've got two big square solid walls which go in the central tower. We've got four of the same main archway, which is an open-ended archway that we join together at either end like the keel of a ship, and those join together to complete the footprint of the lower level. And then we've got a couple of other ruined pieces with a slightly smaller archway that form the main walls of the second story. Now all of these wall components are attached together using particular joiners that are set at certain angles, which we'll have a look at as we get through the build, and these facilitate a really nice join on the right angle that makes it nice and easy to put everything together in the right order. So the first thing we want to do is take our base and two of our open-ended archways and start to work on one end of the lower level. We grab our tight-angled joiner and make sure that we line that up with the two ends of the open-ended archways, and then we want to start to attach that to one side and then the other. So what I'm doing here is I'm using a pin vise to drill out some small holes and using some 1mm brass rod to create some physical bonding that's going to help the pieces stay together, and then of course we're going to lock it all up with glue. So first up you want to drill a couple of holes into your tight angle joiner, fit it with some brass rod, leaving about 5mm out, depress that into the other wall piece so that you can see where the holes need to be for it to line up, drill those out, and then do the same on the other side. Now it's really important to dry fit everything first, connect all the bits together before you start applying any glue, and that way you can make sure that it all marries up nicely. Once you've done the dry fit of the open-ended archways, we're going to start looking at the joiner that attaches them to the square wall sections. Now this joiner is a long, tall joiner that runs the entire length of the wall and sits at about a 135-degree angle, which means you can get a nice obtuse join with the flat section to complete the rest of the footprint. And then once those are attached, we can start to glue together all of our current components. Now with our gluing, you can use a couple of different types of glues, but what I've opted for here is a high bond PVA called Weld Bond. bond. You could also use something a little bit stronger in combination with this glue, a cyanoacrylate based super glue. Sometimes a gel form works really well just around the brass joiners, but because this section is in such compression from having a floor lockdown on top of it, I didn't bother with it at this stage. Just before you glue the tight angle joiner together, we're just going to chuck a couple of holes and bits of brass rod in the base of the open-ended archway sections so that later on those are ready to glue into the base, and then you're ready to glue the tight angle joiner together and that first unit can be put aside to dry. Now obviously this tower is a mirror image, so you can go ahead and follow all of those steps for the other side as well, and then you will have the two triangular ends of the tower ready to go. But before we glue those down, we're going to start to get these central walls ready, because it's really important to have all of your wall components ready to glue down to make sure that you can fit it perfectly on the base. So the first thing we're going to do for these walls is prepare our stairwell. Now the stairwell comes in 4 smaller segments that you'll need to mount and glue individually to the wall, and we're going to do this exactly in the same way, just by drilling out a few holes and lining up some pieces of brass rod. Now you'll notice that the square wall pieces do have a different texture on each side. There's a bit more vine work on one side, so you might want to choose to assemble your stairwell on the side that has a little less protruding vines, because that's going to make it a little bit easier to carve into or to mount your stairs into the side of that wall. Once those stairs are all pinned in and glued, you'll see that it gives that wall a lot of stability, which is definitely going to help during the rest of the assembly. Do the exact same for the opposite square wall, making sure you've got the stairs going in different directions so that you've got a little bit of verticality and interest, and that'll keep the design and flow of the piece during battle a lot more balanced. Now what we're going to do is flip these ruins on their head and drill a couple of holes in the base of them, fill it with some brass rod, and then start lining them up in the center of the base and drill out the holes, and these are ready to glue into the base, and we have our first pieces of wall mounted in. Now that the square walls are in their place, we can return to our archway components and start to mount those into the floor piece as well. We will have already drilled out the brass rod in the base of our archway elements. Now we can just drop them in next to our square walls and line ourselves up with our brass rod and drill some holes in the base piece to line up those rod bonding elements. We also want to chuck a couple of brass rod elements joining our open angled joiner in the archway piece to the square wall itself, and once again we're going to use a combination of mainly PVA weld bond with a little bit of cyanoacrylate superglue. Lining up these whole bottom levels can be a little bit tricky to make sure that you get it exactly on the right spot in the base so that it meshes perfectly with the building footprint. If you have to pick things back up and drill a few new holes to change the position of your walls, don't be too alarmed. It's perfectly normal, and you should have a lovely looking fortress once it's all in the right spot. Now I left all of those lower level elements to dry overnight just so that they've got a really nice strong bond and you've got a solid working base, and now we can start to create our upper levels. So the first thing we want to do is grab our 2 triangular platforms to put on either sides of the tower and mount those down. Once again using some brass rod and of course a bit of weld bond and cyanoacrylate. Now if these don't sit completely flush because some of the joiners are a little higher, feel free to grab yourself either a razor saw or a hacksaw or a modeling saw and just cut those down so that they're flush until you've got a nice smooth join, and then you can glue them straight down on top. Now I just let those pieces dry again just so that we've got a nice stable piece so that nothing's popping up all the time while you're working on the elements above it, and now we can start to build the wall structure of the first floor. Now these 2 wall sections, these corner pieces essentially that sit at 90 degrees on the second level, they've got 2 different wall pieces and you can mix and match those as you like, having a perfect mirror image on either side or having the 2 thicker and the 2 thinner on the opposite sides of the tower, whatever your preference is. We're going to use the exact same process to join these that we did with the archway sections underneath, but we've just got a slightly different joiner, which means that they've got that nice open 90-degree angle to sit on the top floor. So once again, take your pin vise and a little bit of brass rod and get gluing. You can continue to work on that while it's still wet, building on the upper levels because you've got quite a strong base now, and grab one of your triangular floor pieces for the very upper floor and start to glue that down as well. Now there's 2 variations of those triangular floor tiles, so feel free to have a look and pick what looks coolest to you in terms of the ruined battle damage of the tower. Now I glued up these top level wall pieces separately and let them dry, just making sure they were sitting at a perfect right angle by placing the rooftop sections on the top, and that way you know you've got the exact right positioning for your upper floor, and then once that was dry, you can start to line them up onto that triangular platform. Now, if you do what I did and use the combination of the slightly larger wall and the slightly smaller wall together, you get slightly different lengths on your footprint because, of course, the walls have been smashed up a little differently. So what you want to do is make sure that you line up your archway, which is part of the right angle upper floor walls. It's been formed, of course, by the two walls joining together into the 90-degree archway joiner. You want to make sure that that archway footprint is sitting perfectly symmetrical on the floor pattern, and that way you know you're getting your wall in the right place. Feel free to use a pencil to mark out the exact position of your upper floor walls and then pull them away, put a couple of bits of brass rod and glue them down onto the triangular platform of the first floor. And then you can grab a few of your Dark Fortress ruin low walls to make the last crumbling ruins of the very upper story. Once your upper stories are finished, you've got a few pieces left over from your low wall selection to make a few more bits of smashed rock detail just to top off those flat walls from the very lower level. So now the bulk of the construction is complete, we've got a couple of key phases left before we go on into painting. Now the first thing we want to do is grab a little bit of multi-purpose filler and just smooth over the different joins and creases of the building. With so many sort of complex different resin shapes with these modular components, sometimes you'll get things that don't sit completely flush or they're not 100% square, so just grab a little bit of filler and jam them into the gaps. And of course this looks totally fine because you've got a big smashed up ruined tower. Things would be a bit cranky and will have moved around a little bit anyway. And then once you've got that filler jammed in there, grab a little bit of water on your fingers and just smooth it all off and brush it over away from your stones so that it's not impacting any detail, it's just filling in those gaps. The great thing that this does, of course, is it also gives all of your pieces a little bit more structural integrity as they're joined nice and firmly with no gaps between them all, and it's just an extra locking element that really tightens up the whole design. While you've got this filler out, you can also take a bunch and chuck it around the edges of the floors and slanting against the walls, joining the different bits and pieces to build the basis of your rubble. Now, how rubble crazy you like to go is up to you. This particular tower I'm building for a client of mine who doesn't want a lot of rubble, so there's lots of playing surface, but you can definitely go a lot more crazy than I'm going here and really start to provide the basis for huge rubble piles to really show the total chaos and carnage that has been the destruction of this tower. Now that our putty is down, there's one final step for the main body of the tower, and that's to come in with a little bit of our arid earth base ready mixture, which is a lovely mix of fine and coarse gravels and sands and dirts, and just start to sprinkle those all over the ruins in different pieces to give it a little bit more texture and a little bit more grit and start to build up that rubble profile. Now you can do this by just putting kind of dollops of glue all over the model wherever you like. Just brush it on so it's not sitting in a big pile and it looks nice and natural, and just sprinkle it all over the model wherever you'd like a little bit of rubble. You can also take a little bit of your finer stuff and just sprinkle it over the multi-purpose filler while it's still drying, just to increase the texture value of those piles of rubble. Well, that's the main component of the Citadel finish, but of course we still have one little piece left, which is our central stairwell. Now what I'm going to do is design this so that it's fully removable, but you can decide to build it into the tower so that it's locked more in place, but it means of course that it's a little more difficult to get your hand in and get down to the lower models. So basically this is a big network of stairways joining a central platform in the middle that's designed to just sit up and sit on top, and then you can slide in and all over the place. So the first thing we want to do is make 4 identical stairways that are double length. So grab 2 of your individual stairwell sections and glue those together, once again with a little bit of brass rod, and it's really important that you do use both glue elements in these parts because obviously they're just gluing to themselves, they're not gluing to other walls or floor pieces, so we need the maximum structural integrity. Then once you've built your 4 double-length stairway sections, grab your central platform and attach 2 of them on alternating signs with some brass rod and a lot of cyanoacrylate superglue. We want to make sure we get a really strong bond here, so a nice length of brass rod with a lot of glue, and then once that's dry and kind of put a bit of pressure on it and lock it into place, the cyanoacrylate will kind of kick off in about 20 seconds, and then you can go in with weld bond and kind of use that as a bit of a filler and a long-term glue as well, because that will kind of counteract the strong but brittle join of the cyanoacrylate with a little bit more of a ductile join to really make that join sing. Once this first lower section of the stairwell platform is glued and bonded nice and strongly, what you want to do is take it and sit it inside the model. You can use a little bit of blue tack to help it balance while it's sitting there on its own, and then you want to take the last remaining 2 double stairways that you've built and start to play with their positioning, finding a good spot that they can sit on the platform itself so that they mesh up nicely with the top, somewhere where they'll kind of lock in underneath the upper level so they'll stay there nice and firm on their own. Then just grab a pencil, mark out the exact position of that lower stairwell joining the middle platform, pull it all out and join it all together. Once the platform is assembled, of course, we want to give it a little bit of love and texture so it matches the rest of the citadel, so we're going to come back in with a little bit of multi-purpose filler, and then once again, a little bit of our Arid Earth base ready that you can get from the zorpazorp.com store, and then give that a little bit of a sprinkle and a little bit of texture just to tie it all in with the rest of the tower. Well, she's all built and she's coming along very nicely indeed. What we're going to do in the next installment is go through all of the in-depth painting tutorial elements to bring this piece really to life and get into all this gorgeous stonework and the rusty iron banding and go through some of the really nice weathering techniques that are very, very easy but look absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much for watching the first part of this video. Stay tuned for our painting guide, which will be out very soon indeed. And we'll see you all next time here at Wargaming. Thanks so much, guys.